the galaxy had never felt so silent. For as long as anyone could remember, the stars had been alive with activity. Trade ships gliding between planets, emissaries traveling from system to system, and messages carried across light years. But now a shadow moved unseen through the void, devouring everything in its path. Entire planets had vanished, leaving only cold emptiness and a strange, unsettling quiet. The civilizations of the Inner Rim, once proud and confident, scrambled in panic, unsure of what to do. On Viridian, a planet renowned for its scholars and diplomats, emergency meetings had become the norm. Every day, the Council of Light gathered in the largest chamber, its walls lined with glowing holograms of star systems. The councilors' faces were etched with worry as they watched reports of more planets disappearing into nothingness. Scientists worked tirelessly to understand the phenomenon, but each explanation seemed weaker than the last. The councilors had contacted every known species in the galaxy, sending messages carried by the fastest ships. They pleaded, bargained, even begged, but there was no answer. One by one, the older civilizations turned away, offering excuses, claiming they were powerless, or simply ignoring the pleas. Dr. Alara Sen, a human ambassador and scientist stationed on Viridian, observed the scene with a mixture of fear and determination. Humanity had never been the largest or most technologically advanced species in the galaxy, but there was a spark in humans that others often underestimated. She had grown up hearing stories of how humanity had survived plagues, wars, and disasters, always finding a way forward when the odds seemed impossible. She believed that instinct, the willingness to act when others hesitated, was humanity's greatest strength. And now, it might be the galaxy's only hope. Alara moved through the crowded chamber, listening to the councilors' voices rise and fall in despair. "We are doomed," one said, his antennae drooping in defeat. Even the Terran colonies, they won't risk themselves. They are too distant and too small to make a difference. Alara took a deep breath. "You underestimate them," she said quietly, but firmly. "Humans are not like the others. We act when action is needed. We fight when others flee. And we have survived the impossible before. If anyone can respond, it will be humanity." Her words were met with silence. The councilors had long dismissed humans as too young, too reckless, too emotional. They had underestimated humans before, and in this moment, many expected the same. But Alare was confident. She had seen humanity at its best. Engineers repairing ships under fire, soldiers defending entire colonies, and explorers venturing into uncharted space without hesitation. If the galaxy's last hope rested on anyone, it rested on the people who refused to be controlled by fear. Across distant star systems, ordinary humans, pilots, engineers, medics, soldiers, and scientists received the distress signals. The messages were urgent, filled with despair and urgency, warning of the dark force consuming planets. The United Nations Space Command convened immediately, analyzing the risks. A fleet could be lost. Entire colonies might be threatened. But humanity had never turned away from those in need. The instinct to act, to help, was embedded in every human mind and heart. After hours of debate, the decision was made. A fleet would launch into the unknown, carrying nothing but courage, hope, and determination. Captain Rian Kale stood on the deck of the flagship Resolve, looking out at the stars that stretched endlessly ahead. He was not the largest or strongest man, but there was a calm certainty in his presence that inspired the crew. Every human aboard the Resolve shared his resolve. They had trained for difficult situations, but nothing in their lives had prepared them for this. The fleet that accompanied them was small compared to what the galaxy might have expected from a savior. There were no massive fleets, no ancient technologies, no hidden weapons of immense power. There was only humanity. The ingenuity, courage, and resilience of people who refused to let fear control them. The jump into the void was tense. As the human fleet moved through the stars, the shadow seemed to sense their approach. Dark clouds of energy rippled across the void, consuming light and sending faint tremors through space. The crew of the Resolve worked in perfect harmony. Engineers rerouted power to shields and weapons. Pilots navigated through unstable fields of energy, and medics prepared for injuries that might never come. Every human aboard knew that failure was not an option, and yet they faced it without hesitation. Back on Veridion, the counselors watched in disbelief as the human fleet appeared on sensors. "They actually came," one whispered.
"No one else would dare."
Another counselor shook his head.
"It is reckless."
"They will be destroyed." But Alara smiled, quietly, watching the ships move steadily toward the darkened sectors. "They are not reckless. They are human," she said. "And sometimes, that is exactly what is needed." The first encounter with the Shadow Force was sudden. A small research vessel on the outskirts of the consumed system had survived long enough to send a final report. The Shadow moved not like any known warship or living creature. It was a mass of dark energy, shifting, expanding, and consuming without mercy. Communications from the vessel were garbled, fear-filled, and fragmented. Within minutes, silence. The humans received the last faint signals and adjusted their approach, calculating every possible angle. Captain Kale addressed his crew, his voice steady and confident. "We are not here to retreat. We are here to act. Our job is to protect life, to push back the darkness, and to show that humanity will answer when no one else will. We cannot fail."
The crew nodded, and each human knew their part. Their skills, their courage, their willingness to face the unknown would define the outcome of this battle for survival.
As the human fleet approached the first shadow-consumed planet, the full scope of destruction became clear. Entire continents had vanished. Cities and civilizations were erased, leaving only empty oceans and shattered crust. The humans adjusted their shields, readying for the energy waves that radiated from the dark mass. Dr. Alara Sen worked from the observation deck, scanning the energy patterns. "It responds to aggression," she said, "but unpredictably. We must find a way to strike at its weaknesses while protecting those who cannot defend themselves." The first engagement tested the fleet. Smaller ships acted as decoys, drawing portions of the shadow away from the few remaining inhabited zones. Human pilots performed maneuvers that no simulation could have predicted, weaving through unstable energy tendrils, using speed and ingenuity to outmaneuver the enemy. The shadow, a mindless, consuming force in some ways, responded to strategy it had never encountered. It had no experience with humans, and that unfamiliarity became an advantage.
On board the Resolve, Captain Kale guided the fleet with precision. "Keep the shields up."
"Do not engage directly unless necessary. Protect civilians and remaining infrastructure. Use every advantage we have. We are humanity, and they will remember that." The crew moved as one. Engineers patched damages mid-flight, soldiers guided evacuation shuttles, and medics remained ready for any casualties. Hours passed, and the humans managed to stabilize the area, protecting what life remained. The alien observers, watching through sensors from the sidelines, were stunned. Species that had claimed centuries of wisdom and superiority had failed to act. The humans, small and underestimated, had taken the first step where others had faltered. They had entered the void when all hope seemed lost. Night fell on Viridian, though the planet was no longer safe. Holographic projections displayed the human fleet's progress in real time, each movement celebrated and feared. Alara Sen continued her work, sending updates to the Council. Humanity has answered the call, she said, and for the first time, I believe we may have a chance. In the void, the human fleet pressed on. Shadows shifted, energy waves crashed, and yet the humans moved steadily forward. They were not guided by fear or hesitation. They were guided by instinct, courage, and the belief that life, no matter how small or fragile, deserved protection. Humanity had come when no one else would, and the galaxy, for the first time in generations, began to notice. Captain Kale stood on the observation deck, looking at the stars ahead. He did not see fear or despair. He saw opportunity. We do not know what awaits us, he said quietly, but we will face it together. That is what makes us human. Around him, the crew shared the determination. Each ship, each human, carried the same message into the darkness. We are here.
We will act, and we will not fail.
The first part of their journey had begun. The shadow waited, vast and indifferent. But humanity had answered the call, and that alone had changed everything. The galaxy, silent for so long, had finally heard hope. The human fleet had moved steadily into the void, guided by instinct and determination. But the deeper they traveled, the more the darkness seemed to resist their presence. The shadow stretched across countless light years, an endless wave of consuming energy that left nothing behind. Planets that had once teemed with life were now reduced to cold dust and ruin, their histories erased from the galaxy. It would have been terrifying for any species, but the humans aboard the Resolve and the accompanying ships felt something different. They felt purpose. Captain Rion Kale stood on the command deck, watching the energy patterns on the holographic display. The shadows were unpredictable, sometimes moving as if aware of the human strategies, sometimes splitting apart and reforming in ways that defied logic. "Keep the fleet tight," he said, voice calm and commanding. "We need to protect each other, watch the perimeters, and maintain constant communication. The shadow may be powerful, but it does not understand us. That is our advantage." The crew moved with precision. Pilots adjusted their trajectories to avoid sudden bursts of energy, while engineers rerouted power to shields in real time. Medics prepared triage stations in case of injuries, though they all hoped they would not be needed. Dr. Alberta, Pet Bid, Alara Sen worked beside the captain, analyzing energy readings from the shadow. "Its energy is reactive," she said. "It doesn't respond to force in the usual way, but it has patterns. If we can identify them, we can predict its movements and protect lives more effectively." A small human reconnaissance ship, the Beacon, detected a ripple of energy moving in a jagged, repeating pattern. The human scientists realized that this ripple created temporary vulnerabilities in the shadow. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but humans were trained to notice details others often missed. The fleet adjusted its approach, using the beacon to map safe zones and weak points in the shadow's advance. When the first engagement occurred, it was nothing like the simulations or training exercises. The shadow moved with speed and aggression, surging toward the human ships. Pilots on the outer vessels performed daring maneuvers, dodging waves of energy that could have disintegrated unprotected hulls. Smaller fighters acted as decoys, drawing parts of the shadow away from the larger ships. Human ingenuity was on full display. One engineer rerouted a failing thruster mid-flight, creating a sudden burst of speed that allowed a ship to slip past a deadly tendril of dark energy. Another pilot used gravitational anomalies to slingshot her vessel into an unexpected position, buying precious seconds for the fleet to regroup. The alien species observing from the sidelines were stunned. They had relied on massive armies, shields, and ancient technology, but none had faced the shadow directly. Their hesitation had allowed entire sectors to be consumed. Humanity, small and underestimated, had entered the danger zone and adapted instantly. Every human choice, every split-second decision, seemed to bend the outcome in favor of survival. It was not overwhelming technology that allowed them to fight. It was creativity, courage, and a willingness to act where others had frozen. On board the Resolve, Captain Kale watched as the fleet moved in perfect coordination. "We protect the civilians first," he said. "We do not abandon anyone. If a ship is trapped, we will rescue it. If a colony is in danger, we will save it. That is what humans do." The crew nodded. Their strategy was simple but powerful. Act decisively, adapt constantly, and refuse to let fear dictate their choices.
Doctor!
Alara Sen had been studying the Shadow's reactions, noting how it seemed to anticipate conventional tactics but failed to respond to unconventional maneuvers.
"It's learning," she said.
"But its learning is rigid. It assumes every action is predictable. Humans are not predictable. That is why we survive."
Her words carried weight, reminding the fleet that their creativity was more powerful than any weapon. The battle continued for hours.
Waves of dark energy surged across the sector, threatening to tear ships apart and erase the last remaining life forms. Humans navigated through the chaos, coordinating attacks, rescues, and repairs simultaneously. One human pilot, Lieutenant Mara Ven, guided a refugee ship through a collapsing energy field, using the ship's momentum to avoid destruction. Another crew member on a smaller vessel redirected energy from damaged shields into the propulsion system, saving a stranded research station just moments before the Shadow consumed it. Despite the danger, the humans never wavered. They did not panic when ships were damaged or when energy tendrils threatened to sever communication. Each human acted with focus, improvising and making split-second decisions that often defied logic, but worked. They understood the Shadow not as an unstoppable force, but as a challenge, one to be met with courage and ingenuity. From the alien observation stations, whispers spread. "How do they survive?" asked one observer, shaking its segmented head. Another replied, "It is not technology. It is their determination, their willingness to act when others flee. They are different." The truth was undeniable. Humanity's approach to crisis was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. They were fearless, adaptable, and selfless in ways that inspired awe. The humans discovered that the Shadow responded to collective human action in surprising ways. Coordinated movements, simultaneous attacks, and rapid problem-solving disrupted its energy flow. Captain Kale recognized this as an opportunity.
"We will not only defend," he said. "We will strike where it is weakest."
Every ship, every crew member contributes. Humanity is not a single weapon. It is a force. The fleet executed a complex maneuver that humans themselves had never attempted in simulations. Smaller vessels distracted and probed, drawing energy tendrils into traps. Mid-sized ships created protective corridors, shielding evacuation routes. The Resolve coordinated everything, adjusting tactics in real time. Even as some ships sustained damage, the humans pressed forward, refusing to retreat. In one critical moment, a human engineer, Lieutenant Jarek Tolan, noticed an irregularity in the Shadow's energy pattern.
"It pulses differently when threatened directly," he shouted over communications.
Using this observation, the fleet concentrated firepower at precise intervals, creating moments of vulnerability. For a brief but crucial period, the Shadow's advance slowed, giving stranded planets a chance to evacuate their citizens. Dr. Alara Sen monitored the results, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls.
"The Shadow is reactive, but predictable in these micro-patterns.
We can exploit this. Every human action counts. Timing, coordination, courage. They all create openings." She looked at the young humans operating critical systems with precision and pride. This is humanity at its best. As the hours dragged on, the humans continued their fight. The Shadow shifted unpredictably, and yet each human choice created ripples of success. Ships moved in formations that were never planned, improvising paths and strategies as they went. Every rescue, every maneuver, every moment of ingenuity allowed more life to survive. Refugees were guided to safe zones. Damaged ships were repaired mid-flight, and the Shadow was forced back, step by step. Finally, after a relentless battle, the humans had stabilized the sector. The shadow had not been defeated, but it had been checked. Entire systems that would have been lost remained intact. Civilizations that would have perished had new hope. The humans had proven that courage, determination, and intelligence could stand against what seemed unstoppable.
The alien species watching were silent for a long time. Their arrogance, their centuries of reliance on tradition and technology, had been exposed as insufficient. Humans, small and underestimated, had acted where others hesitated. The galaxy began to recognize that there was something different about humanity, something worth noticing, respecting, and perhaps following. Captain Kale stood on the observation deck, staring at the flickering lights of surviving planets. "We did not come here to prove anything," he said to the crew. "We came because we could. We acted when others would not. And that is what defines us." The crew nodded, understanding fully the weight of their actions. Humanity had not just survived, it had changed the course of the galaxy. Dr. Amore. Alara Sen observed the relief and awe on the faces of the alien observers. She realized that humanity's true power was not in ships or weapons, but in their willingness to act, to sacrifice, and to think beyond rules and fear. The galaxy had been silent, indifferent, and even hostile. But humans had answered, and in doing so, they had reminded every species that courage and ingenuity could turn the tide of even the darkest forces. Night fell on the human fleet as it regrouped and prepared for the next stage of the mission. The shadow still moved, vast and consuming, but the humans had learned its patterns, adapted to its attacks, and shown that survival was possible. And as the stars stretched endlessly ahead, each human knew they were part of something larger. A force that could change the galaxy, not through domination, but through courage, ingenuity, and the refusal to abandon life when it needed saving most. For the first time in countless years, the galaxy felt a spark of hope. Humanity had answered the call. And while the shadow remained, looming and relentless, it had learned something new as well. Humans were unlike anything it had faced before, and they would not be ignored. The darkness had lingered for centuries, moving silently across star systems, leaving nothing but emptiness behind. Every civilization that had faced it before had failed, retreating into isolation or surrendering to despair. But humanity had not retreated. They had followed the call into the void, bringing hope where none had existed. And for the first time, the galaxy saw that courage could make a difference. The human fleet had stabilized several star systems already, but the shadow was still vast and relentless. It seemed to respond to every tactic humans devised, learning and adapting in ways that were disturbing yet fascinating. Captain Rian Kale stood on the bridge of the Resolve, watching the energy patterns shift across the holographic map. There was no doubt that the final confrontation was approaching. The fleet would have to face the shadow directly, risking everything to protect the last remaining civilizations. Alara Sen moved beside him, eyes scanning readings faster than most humans could process. "The shadow has weaknesses," she said. "We have seen them in micro-patterns, but now we need a coordinated strike on a massive scale. Timing will be critical. Every ship, every action must align perfectly." The fleet prepared for the engagement. Pilots practiced their maneuvers and simulations. Engineers worked to maximize shields and propulsion systems, and medics ensured that triage stations were fully operational. Every human aboard understood that failure meant extinction, not only for them but for countless civilizations that could not defend themselves. The weight of responsibility hung heavy, but it also strengthened their resolve. As the human fleet approached the shadow's core, the void itself seemed to react. Dark tendrils of energy stretched toward them, probing, searching, testing. Smaller ships darted in and out, drawing attention and distracting the shadow from the larger vessels. The Resolve and the mid-sized support ships formed the heart of the attack, protected by layers of decoys and shields. Captain Kale's voice was calm, but resolute over the communications network. "Remember? We fight together.
Every action counts. Trust your instincts and trust each other. We are human. We adapt, we survive, and we protect.
The shadow struck with sudden force.
Waves of dark energy rippled outward, colliding with the fleet in explosions of light and particle matter. Ships rocked under the pressure, and alarms rang across every deck. Pilots screamed over comms, navigating through the chaos with precision, dodging tendrils that could disintegrate a vessel in seconds. Engineers worked feverishly, rerouting power and repairing hull breaches in real time. Every human aboard acted with focus and ingenuity. It was not overwhelming technology that carried them, but courage, determination, and adaptability. Lieutenant Mara Venn, piloting one of the outer decoy ships, executed a daring maneuver, drawing a wave of energy directly into a gravitational anomaly. The energy reacted unpredictably, creating a momentary gap in the Shadow's defenses. Captain Kale seized the opportunity.
All ships, focus fire now. Timing is everything.
Human ships accelerated toward the breach. Weapons fired in synchronized volleys, guided by human instincts and split-second calculations. Unlike other species, which relied on rigid protocols and pre-programmed strategies, humans adapted instantly to the situation. They improvised, thinking creatively, taking risks that no algorithm could predict. The Shadow writhed and pulsed, struggling against the unpredictable tactics. Dr. Alara Sen had calculated the Shadow's energy cycles, noting subtle vulnerabilities during each pulse.
Concentrate fire at these intervals, she instructed. Every strike counts.
If we maintain coordination, we can destabilize the core. The fleet followed her guidance, each ship acting as part of a larger organism. Their actions perfectly synchronized, yet individually decisive. Hours passed in intense combat. The Shadow lashed out, tearing through decoy ships, but the humans persisted. Pilots guided refugees through collapsing fields, engineers improvised to keep damaged ships operational, and medics ensured that every injured crew member received immediate care. There was no hesitation, no fear-driven paralysis, only action, cooperation, and determination. Captain Kale watched as one of the smaller vessels, the Valiant, performed a critical maneuver. It drew a massive tendril of shadow energy away from a populated planet, buying precious time for evacuation. The ship's shields flickered, hull integrity weakening, but the pilot executed the maneuver flawlessly. The planet's inhabitants were saved, and the crew aboard the Valiant proved once again that courage could overcome raw power. The alien species observing from a distance were silent. Centuries of superiority, advanced technology, and rigid strategies had been rendered irrelevant. Humans, small and underestimated, had acted where others would have fled or hesitated. Their unpredictability, creativity, and selfless dedication allowed them to challenge the Shadow in ways no one else could. Slowly, awe replaced skepticism. For the first time, these species recognized that humanity was not merely a young civilization. They were a force that could change the fate of the galaxy. As the fleet pressed deeper, the Shadow's core came into view. It was immense, a swirling mass of darkness that consumed light and matter with terrifying efficiency. The fleet's sensors could barely track its movements.
Captain Kale addressed his crew over the intercom, voice steady despite the tension. This is it.
Our opportunity. We protect every life we can, and we strike where it is weakest. Humanity has faced impossible odds before, and we will face them again. Trust yourselves. Trust each other. We are the last hope. Let's do this together. Every human aboard understood the stakes. The core's energy waves surged outward, striking the fleet with violent force. Smaller ships acted as distractions, weaving through the chaos, while mid-sized vessels shielded evacuation routes and protected vital points. The resolve guided the fleet's movements, making split-second decisions based on instincts, observations, and human ingenuity.
Doctor.
Alara Sen focused on the Shadow's pulsing core. Its pattern is repeating now, but with slight variations. If we time it perfectly, we can create a chain reaction that destabilizes the entire structure. It is risky, but it is our only chance. The crew around her moved with precision, coordinating energy bursts and weapon fire to exploit the core's weaknesses. In a coordinated strike, the fleet launched everything they had at the Shadow's core. Energy beams, projectiles, and concentrated pulses hit the same spot in perfect timing. For a moment, the darkness shuddered, and a ripple of instability spread through it. Human ships dodged violently as the Shadow attempted to recover. But the strategy worked. The core began to fracture, creating gaps through which planets and survivors could escape. Captain Kale watched with pride as his crew executed the plan flawlessly. "Keep the focus," he urged.
"We cannot falter now." Every human acted with courage and clarity, improvising as needed, filling in gaps, adjusting trajectories, and compensating for unexpected shifts. Humanity's determination and adaptability had turned the tide.
As the Shadow weakened, Dr. Alara Sen calculated the final sequence.
"If we push one final burst of coordinated energy, we can collapse the core entirely. It will consume itself."
The fleet prepared, every ship aligned, every weapon charged, every crew member focused. At Kale's command, the energy burst was released. The Shadow convulsed violently, tendrils of dark energy unraveling and collapsing in on themselves. Light returned to areas that had been consumed, revealing planets that had been on the brink of destruction. The last wave of dark energy dissipated, leaving only silence and the glow of human ships, victorious. The alien observers were stunned into silence. They had never imagined that a species so small and underestimated could achieve what humans had done. Entire civilizations had been saved, and the Shadow that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries had been defeated. Not through brute force, but through courage, ingenuity, and selfless determination. Captain Kale stood on the bridge of the Resolve, looking at the stars restored to their natural brilliance. "We did not do this for recognition," he said quietly. "We did this because we could, because it was right, because humanity does not abandon life in its darkest hour." Dr. Alara Sen smiled, watching the relief and gratitude spreading across the galaxy. "They will remember this," she said. "Humanity has shown what courage looks like, not just to the galaxy, but to every civilization that thought it was alone." The fleet remained in the sector, helping civilizations rebuild, providing technology and guidance, and ensuring that the Shadow would never return. Humans worked alongside other species, showing them that survival was not just about power, but about cooperation, courage, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. Over time, the galaxy transformed. The Council of Light invited humans to join as equals, recognizing their unique contributions. Other species began to act with courage rather than fear, inspired by the humans who had faced the void and survived. Humanity had not only saved the galaxy, they had changed it forever. Captain Kale looked at his crew one last time before departing the sector.
"We answered the call," he said, "and we will continue to answer."
That is what it means to be human. The crew nodded, knowing that their actions had forged a legacy that would endure for generations. As the fleet set course for home, the galaxy watched in awe. The Shadow had been defeated, hope had been restored, and humanity had proven that even in the darkest hour, courage, ingenuity, and determination could illuminate the stars. And for the first time, every civilization understood that when life was threatened and the stars seemed silent, humanity would always be the one to come.